going on here?
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to UMass Beyond the Classroom, a show designed to acknowledge and promote many people at UMass Amherst whose hard work extends beyond the confines of the classroom. I'm your host, Danzel Jones. Today, I am joined by Professor Joel Sachs. Welcome to UMass Beyond the Classroom.
Thank you, Denzel.
So, Joel, I understand that you teach a class called Youth Democracy in the Entertainment Industry. Do you mind if you can talk a little bit about that class and how it involves with social movement?
Yeah, sure. The title itself, Youth Democracy in the Entertainment Industries, suggests that we're looking at the intersection, the nexus of these different forces in society. And the premise of the course, when I started teaching it, is that young people have a tremendous amount of power in the marketplace and in the larger political arena. And the question is, given that we're paying a tremendous amount of money for the entertainment industries, whether it's film, whether it's fashion, whether it's fast food, and now particularly with convergence media, with the pipeline of broadband, of internet, of smartphones, we're paying a tremendous amount of money. And the question is, what do we get back? Do we have any control? Should we have any control? So this idea of democracy, one person, one vote, having a voice, having representation. What kind of representation do young people, and by extension, citizens generally in our communities, have over the images, the stories, the symbols that we're consuming? So that's the premise. I started teaching it with the idea that we're living in a situation right now with the prison industrial complex where 12% of young African American males are locked up, largely for drug-related crimes where whites go free. And so this question of, we have this media apparatus that's representing African Americans, young people in certain ways, and what does it have to speak to this situation of mass incarceration, where there's a whole cohort of people in this country who are denied their freedom. And if the idea of democracy is liberty and justice for all, and that's being violated, transgressed in a major way, and now we see it's been teaching the course for 8 years now, and with Black Lives Matter, it just brings it right to the fore of how unequal this society is. And representation and that power, I think, is something that we have to look at and contest in some ways. So the course is both about looking at these issues, but the idea of praxis, of what's the relationship between studying these things and taking action.
Okay. And then what are some of the most pressing social issues affecting this generation of youth? And what can be done to solve these issues?
Yeah. The way the course starts out is this question of what stories get told. What's the story facing young people? And we could look at, in earlier iterations of the course, I've looked at children. I've included commercialism, the hyper-commercialism, the targeting of kids, tweens. As I've taught the course, I've focused it more on young adults because those are the people who are in the class. So the two of the big issues that I look at are, number one, what I term the economic squeeze facing young people, which includes the job insecurity, the situation which is referred to in some places as internation, the way in which there's been a whole shift in the entertainment industries and elsewhere from, instead of hiring people for entry-level jobs, they're taking interns and they're doing those jobs. So it's cutting out all kinds of employment for young people who would be going there. The issue of student debt. And so the way in which these things come together and create a situation for many young people that is incredibly insecure. And I think the Occupy movement, when we talk about social movements, so in terms of looking at these issues, when we look at these, I also try to pair these with thinking about social movements in our time or in history or around the world that relate to these. So in terms of that issue of the economic squeeze, we can look at Occupy. And many of the people, those people who've written about the Occupy movement, looked at it, say that many of the people who were forces in Occupy in Zuccotti Park in New York and around the country were actually those people who have college debt, who either graduated with degrees and aren't getting employment in decent ways and are shackled as a kind of indenture with tremendous levels of debt. The average college debt that a student graduates with is $28,000. College debt is the largest category of debt in the country. It surpasses housing debt, other credit card debt. It's now $1.2 trillion. It's an enormous amount of money. And so that's one of the situations in terms of the conditions facing youth. The other situation that I look at is the quote-unquote situation facing urban youth, youth of color in this country. And as I say, mass incarceration, the school-to-prison pipeline. So there are these two instances where if we think about what is democracy, this idea of liberty and justice for all, equal rights, we have an economic society, a political economy that is tremendously unequal and has become ever more so since the 2008 crash. So what do we do about that? What do we do about that? And what is the relationship of the entertainment industries to that? In terms of thinking about that, there are different ways to approach that. Looking at what are actually democratic practices that exist, that are going on. And since Occupy, we see in this country in the last 3 to 4 years, there's the Occupy movement. We have had in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, the movement, the Fight for 15. And in a very short period of time, that demand for a $15 an hour wage has become something that now we talk about. It wasn't on the agenda before. Powered not just by youth. The people who work at fast food industries are a wide range of ages. But it's a movement that we can look at in terms of when we think about the entertainment industries. I would include fast food in that. Fast food is part of, very much connected in terms of franchises. You look at a Happy Meal and how much the toys of a Happy Meal and what marketing by McDonald's does, where the marketing appears in terms of TV commercials. It's this web of industries that's very much connected. And so the question of when we're looking at an industry, different ways of assessing those industries, what's the impact on children and families and communities? What are the labor practices of these industries? So looking at McDonald's and fast food, what are their labor practices? What are the kinds of representations that are getting done about young people? So for example, when we look at TV news, the primary way in which urban youth are represented on TV news is images of violence, crime. And so the predominant image that white viewers, older white viewers who are watching the news, who are the predominant watchers of certain kinds of local regional network news, come away with the impression that black kids, Puerto Rican kids are violent, are criminals, are drug users, because that's the predominant image that people see, white people see on TV. And that can result, as in California and other states, in repressive prison treatment, laws in schools. So the question in terms of local news, how might we impact what kinds of stories get told? Being in the class, the four media literacy questions I ask that are kind of a frame for thinking about it generally. What stories get told? Who tells the stories and why? What are the motives? What stories don't get told and what stories do you want to tell? So if we look, for example, at Springfield, I'm doing work in the Springfield Public Schools, and I've been doing a media monitoring project of ABC 40, Fox News, which is the same corporation in Springfield. It's also now Channel 3. And the condition of poverty, 3/4 of the kids in the Springfield Public Schools are eligible for for free lunch programs. You never see a story about poverty, root causes of poverty. When you see a story of violence, of crime in Springfield, the reports are never about root causes and thinking about root solutions. And so that's something we address in the course as well, as a kind of media literacy perspective on things.
Okay. And finally, one other question that I have for you is that, like, for students that are interested in taking the class, who are able to take the class, and who would you suggest to actually register for the class?
Well, formally, since we're in the Department of Communication, the course is open to communication seniors and juniors. It's an upper level course. We have, oftentimes, there are people who want to come from other departments or even from other colleges, and it's always good to have somebody else in the mix who hasn't necessarily gone through the communication protocol, the different courses that we teach in the Department of Communication. I think people who are interested in social change, people who are interested in not just joining the entertainment industries and kind of hugging the way the system is, embracing it totally, but saying, are there ways that we can change this system? So thinking critically about that system. So it's got to be people who want to change the way things are.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to once again thank Professor Sachs for speaking with us about his career at UMass. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Denzel.
On behalf of the entire crew, thanks for stopping by. I'm your host, Denzel Jones, signing off.